The Galien Foundation fosters, recognizes, and rewards excellence in scientific innovation to improve the human condition.
André Malraux said once in one of his novels, "Une vie humaine ne vaut rien, mais rien ne vaut une vie humaine." Human life is worth nothing, but nothing is worth a human life. All these men and women are trying to save human lives. Is there anything more noble than that?
The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Biotechnology Product, Best Product for Orphan Rare Diseases, Best Medical Technology, Best Digital Health Solution, Best Incubator Accelerator Equity, Best Startup. Around the globe, the Prix Galien is considered as the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for the industry, mobilizing an unrivaled network of Nobel laureates and top biomedical scientists. The Galien Foundation manages an independent, cross-functional, and geographically diverse program of events and sponsorship to brand the best of the best in new medicines and diagnostics. The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanum Award for Global Health Equity is bestowed to an individual, a company, an academic institution, or a non-governmental agency that has helped to improve the human condition through the application of biopharmaceutical science to problems of developing or underserved populations worldwide.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
Staging this event in Africa is a significant statement that science and innovation are needed as much here in Africa as anywhere else.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation.
Welcome to the Galien Foundation Week of Biomedical Innovation webinars here in New York. The objective of this week is to give additional context and backgrounds for the largest annual event, the Prix Galien USA Awards, to be held Thursday here in New York in conjunction with the annual Galien Forum of speakers representing top scientific experts and public health leaders. Because the mission of the Galien community is to improve the human condition, we have developed this webinar series to give nominees for the awards the chance to describe their journey of medical discovery. This year's Galien USA Awards has a record 176 nominees in 7 categories from 169 companies, covering 18 diverse therapeutic areas, ranging from cancer, cardiology and neurosciences, infectious and rare genetic diseases, vaccines, the list goes on. We will be looking closely at the products in all these critical areas throughout this week. So for today, we are in the best pharmaceutical category, and our focus is on this time a nice fireside chat. And the discussion will focus on a backdrop to the unprecedented global pandemic and its implications going forward for research into new antiviral drugs and vaccines. And we'll discuss if private sector incentives are aligned to meet the next wave of public health threats. Similarly, we'll ask if we're all investing in expanding the research platforms for women's health and reproductive health as well. So we will have time for audience questions. So if you have questions, please submit them to the Q&A and we'll get them at the end of our session today. So now let's start with some introductions. My name is Jessica Federer, and I'll be moderating for today's fireside chat. I'm a board member for some very innovative companies, including Sage Therapeutics, a brain health company, and Pluto Health, a health technology company, as well as Angelini Ventures. So I'm very pleased to introduce today Jared Baton. Jared, would you tell us a little bit about your background?
Hi, Jessica. Great to be here with you today, and great to be with everyone listening. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm here representing Gilead Sciences, and we're really honored to be among this group of distinguished companies bringing forward important and innovative solutions for advancing global health through scientific innovation. I am really excited to be able to talk about what we're here to talk about today, and then really within the larger context. I couldn't have been more motivated by that introduction video. Although the setting Oscar Knight sets the style for my dress very high, I think. So we'll have to see how that all goes. But really couldn't be happy to be able to talk about these issues, because this is such an important time for innovation, and such an important time for me representing Gilead, and for really the industry as a whole, to talk about the commitment to continuous scientific discovery and really making big changes in the world. So at Gilead, I'm Vice President of Clinical Development, leading our HIV development franchise. I can't think of anything more important for my heart to be able to work on. The Gilead's position of expertise, of leadership in HIV goes back decades now. First, has developed innovative therapeutic options both for HIV treatment and for prevention, and ever reaching towards what we really want to get to over my shoulder here is actually not having to work on HIV at all anymore. And I think that's the place that we would really all like to be, is to work so hard on all the therapeutic areas we work on, to be able to say that we can make disease a thing of the past. I'm a clinician, an infectious disease specialist by training, also a researcher and an epidemiologist. I have worked in academia and in industry, and have worked all across the world, really trying to get to that point to be able to end the HIV epidemic globally. I'm really happy and satisfied every day to be at the place I am, because it is the interface of both science and driven science, but also tremendous purpose and mission in what we're doing, with strong commitment to justice, equity, and access across the world. And I think that's, I have to say, frankly, something that is the history of HIV itself, and that brings to many, many therapeutic areas to be able to talk about justice and equity at the same time as we're talking about science. And I hope we get to talk about that all today, because for infectious diseases and women's health, which is the title of the panel today, there's no better place to have that interface. I'm tremendously lucky to be able to collaborate with people all around the world in the science that we do, but also in the advocacy and work for equity that we do. So it is science, and it is science that is better when we're all doing it together. And I think many of our introducers in that great video would feel exactly the same way.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. And you are working in a field where perhaps we've seen the most tremendous progress during our lifetime. And now we see this, breakthrough in treatment that you've brought to market. It's always interesting to hear a little bit about the development journey. And, in our industry, we all know very well how many years it takes to go through the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, post-market surveillance, how long it takes to actually develop something new. And even though in the HIV space, we've seen so much rapid innovation development, it's still quite a journey. So can you share with us some of the more memorable milestones and moments?
Absolutely. Let's cast back for a moment, because I think you alluded to it nicely. But it is in our lifetimes that we can remember when there was, first of all, no recognition of what HIV was.
Exactly.
And then certainly many of us remember well when there was no therapeutics whatsoever. And to go from that place to where we are today, where for HIV treatment, there are tens of millions of people around the world who take medicines for HIV that make their viral levels undetectable, and our public health agencies like CDC and WHO remind us that individuals who have undetectable viral loads have healthier lives and lifespans that are the same as the individuals, comparable to individuals who do not have HIV, and are also uninfectious to their partners. What a change in the world that it is. And then HIV prevention. There are an increasing number of HIV preventative tools that people can use, including therapeutics, that can keep them free of that can reduce their chances of acquiring HIV. What a radically different world. And I think for those of us who remember, well, 0 pills, handful of pills with great burden on individuals, and remember the times of real suffering, actually, all around the world, to be able to think within generations what that transformation could be. And yet still real distance to go. Every year, more than 1 million people around the world acquire HIV. The people who are taking HIV therapies now do so for life, and the virus will reemerge if therapy is stopped. And there are individuals for whom the therapeutic options that exist now just don't work because of accumulation of antiviral resistance or intolerance to the medications, or are not workable because the therapeutic options that exist just don't fit into people's lives and the complexity that people can have. And so we have to strive more to get to this, to be able to provide new options for HIV treatment and prevention, so that we don't have to have people falling through the cracks anymore. The milestones have been tremendous, and I recall all the time when I walk around the Galien campus the innovation that's happened over the past 35 plus years here and from colleagues and friends all around the world. Gilead researchers have contributed to 12 new HIV medications, including what took that handful of pills to be a single tablet a day, now a number of years ago, to consolidate all the HIV medicines that one would need for effective therapeutics into a single pill. The first medication that was used for pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, to keep individuals who don't have HIV to reduce their risk of acquiring the virus. And then the first agent that can be dosed just twice a year for HIV, which is something that that is actually the reason to be here at the Galien Week of Innovation, talking about things this week. And what a transformation that world has been. So do you want some milestones in that particular innovation? We can talk about that.
Sure. Yes, please.
I think we're for Gilead Sciences this year, the Galien Fund, the Galien Foundation has nominated Gilead's agent lenacapavir, which is marketed as Sunlenca. And for individuals who want to know more information, I think there's information available on the webinar to be able to have more detailed information about the prescribing information for Sunlenca. But Gilead first started working more than 16 years ago on the medication that became Sunlenca. When you think about, you alluded to the challenges of drug development and the timelines of drug development. It is not easy, and it is not a linear pathway. And the tremendous innovation that we've seen in HIV from around the world and in other therapeutic areas is not because it's a straightforward path. Gilead began a program, and for a dozen years did not develop a medication to bring into clinical testing. So a dozen years of preclinical research, with more than 4,000 molecules synthesized and tested, and tossed to get to the 4,001st or so, that became the medication that we're talking about this week. And then at the same time, the what it takes then, once a candidate is identified, to be able to move into demonstration and evaluation of safety and efficacy in people. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is working at a place like this is the ability to be efficient and motivated, and working with exceptional speed, dedication, and agility. And so once clinical candidate was identified, Gilead moved with only 3.5 years between the filing of the IND and the submitting of its new drug application to be able to evaluate lenacapavir within a population of people living with HIV, to evaluate its safety and efficacy.
Wow.
And it became what is the first approved capsid inhibitor. So it inhibits one of the structural proteins of the virus, targeted very specifically for that. And the first and only HIV agent that's given just twice a year. It's a subcutaneous injection that is dosed every 6 months. And what a change from those of us who remember the handful of pills taken multiple times a day for HIV treatment, to be able to think of an HIV medicine that is nothing at all like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of those spaces where we went from not even understanding the disease to learning about the disease and going through every stage of complex treatments to get to twice a year. It's astounding. So obviously, the impact that you're seeing in patients' lives is tremendous, because you're making such a big step to reduce the burden, going to twice a year injections. But can you share a little bit about the impact that you're seeing in patients' lives, and then also a little bit about what the clinician response has been? Because for clinicians, it must also be incredible to see the progression and the speed and the innovation coming out.
Yeah. I mentioned before, I've been an HIV clinician, a treating clinician myself, and I certainly remember. I remember no therapies. I remember therapies of significantly greater burden than most people face today, and I also remember deeply how individualized the challenges can be in HIV therapy, even when there are many, many treatment options that are available, such as there are today. And I think that's one of the important pieces in the medicine that we're talking about for Galien Week, the lenacapavir, is that this was the first this indication that's been developed for lenacapavir. It is, first of all, is for individuals who are heavily treatment experienced and have multi-drug resistance. So it is individuals who may have years, decades of treatment experience, and may either because they've accumulated antiviral resistance, because of the complexities of antiretroviral therapy, or because of intolerance, are unable to be successfully virally suppressed in the way that most patients living with HIV are these days. And for those individuals, it's that individual who is living with active viremia, who is having progressive HIV disease. It's really harkens back to a time that most of us don't want to remember at all, which is when HIV was untreatable. The data from the data that support lenacapavir in its filing for this population was based on a study called Capella, and I want to tell you a little bit about it because it's so meaningful that we can still be innovating even for individuals who are often at the most dire need of new therapies. Capella recruited individuals who had multi-drug resistance, often resistance to every class of HIV medicines that was available to them. So people often at the end of their rope, and who weren't able to achieve viral suppression. And the trial then tested lenacapavir as a therapy in combination with the best optimization of individualized additional medicines that could be compiled for each person in the trial, and demonstrated that that for many, many individuals in the trial, they were able to achieve viral suppression. For some of them, the stories are quite striking from their clinicians, that this was the first time in years that someone was able to achieve viral suppression, or that this was the first time in years that someone's immune system, someone's CD4 count, which is the measure of how of what is degraded with HIV disease and what comes back with HIV treatment, was able to rise for the first time in years. And for some people, how they really had been planning that they would not be able to be successfully treated and would have to face the consequences of end-stage HIV disease, and instead could really think about something different. I'm incredibly proud to work for a place that could take a new medicine and test it in the most challenged and challenging clinical trial population first. While there are many needs in HIV, I think keeping a laser focus on what the greatest needs are in all of the therapeutic areas we work in, and making sure that we're innovating to be able to have, with that person centricity in mind, is absolutely key. When I'm thinking about the impact now, I just this week, just last week, returned from the European AIDS conference, where I was able to talk to providers there about what this medication has been doing for individuals who have multi-drug resistant HIV, and being able to really hear about those individual stories, because that's what we do this work for. We do this work for big public health impact, and we ground it all in the individual stories instead of individuals who benefit from the therapies that we provide, and those individuals who have changes in their life because of new therapeutic agents. Some of the data that we were able to present with colleagues at the European AIDS meeting emphasized the positive health impact quality of life data from the trial. And so it's not only about numbers, it's about life, about improving quality of life for individuals who are living with HIV. And boy, that makes tremendous difference.
All the difference. It's so important to keep that into the context. And kudos to your company for starting with that really difficult, complex population. There are much easier ways to bring a drug to market than to start with the hardest challenges. So that brings us to our next question of some of the challenges that Gilead faced in getting to this historic milestone. Are there lessons that you can now look back on and share that might add to a better public understanding or public awareness of the process, and some of those milestones that you can share that might help improve speed and improve the ability to do more complex studies going forward?
Well, I think I'll double down on 4,000 molecules synthesized to get to one. And I think 4,000 molecules in a dozen years.
Not for the faint of heart. Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart. Not for the faint of heart. And it's not if this were all easy, it would be done, right? If health and treating complex disease and addressing really challenge unmet needs that sit at the interface often of societal challenge and societal challenge and individual challenge and medical challenge. If that were all easy, it would all be done. And at the same time, that's why we need innovation. That's why we need to double down on the ability to figure out what things we can do in complex therapeutic areas, including HIV, to be able to develop the innovative strategies that work in people's lives, that allow them to get to successful efficacy and safety for treatments or for prevention or for other therapeutic areas for life extension and importance of time and quality of life. And it's tough. And I think the point I make all the time, 4,000 molecules, 12 years, is, I'm going to say it at least 3 more times before the end of our call, is that this is what it takes. And then at the end, for things that are able to run that gauntlet, and of course, many things fall away along the way, for things that are able to run that gauntlet, then figuring out how to make sure that they have the greatest impact they can for the health of the public all around the world. And so that the work is not done when you go from 4,000 to 1, and the work is not done when there's regulatory approval, and the work is not done when something goes from idea to medicine, that the work has to continue thereafter. I think when I'm looking ahead, what I see in HIV as a field is the continued need for developing therapeutic options that will continue to fit in people's lives. And what people living with HIV tell me all the time, tell other clinicians, and what people who would benefit from HIV prevention tell us is that the next frontier is really longer acting medicines. And of course, we talked about one of them today. When I think about what our next frontier looks like, it's how to develop longer acting medicines that will fit into people's lives, to be able to give them treatment or prevention options, so they can figure out the one that's right for them, give people choices so they can make the choice that's right for them, and be able to get to successful treatment or prevention. And that requires another 4,000 or 4,000 times whatever molecules to be synthesized, and the time it takes. And I think the one of the phrases I use all around here is, remember that things that are longer acting take longer, because the entire pharmaceutical development process for something that takes longer requires longer preclinical studies and longer early clinical studies and longer follow-up, because one has to understand the safety and the efficacy of new agents all the way through their pharmacologic cycle. And being able to have the dedication and the grit to be able to make it through that whole process is what is absolutely required of our industry and of our partnerships with people all around the world, to know that we're all in this together for that duration.
And you've said a few times now about fitting it into people's lives, and getting from 4,000 molecules to 1 is just the start, because then you have to get it into 4,000 people. And convincing an increasingly skeptical population to participate in clinical trials, and a much more diverse population than we've traditionally seen in clinical trials to participate in science. That's the part where, as an industry, I think we're still in early days. So you know this, but for some of our participants, it wasn't until 1993 that Congress passed a law requiring that women and minorities be included in clinical research. And so it's only been at best 30 years, but in reality, much less, that we've had a more diverse population participating in clinical research. And for therapies to work in a broad population, we need a broad population to trust us as partners and to participate in clinical trials. What are you seeing in that space that's helping people to be more comfortable volunteering? Because those are the scientists are the heroes, but also the volunteers participating in the studies. What are you seeing that's giving you hope that we're getting closer to having more representation?
Oh, Jessica, I am so happy you asked that question. And I'm so happy you asked that question, because it is part and parcel of doing this work well. And it is part and parcel, really, I think, of what we try to do here every day at Gilead, is make sure that the work that we're doing is going to have the impact that we want it to have. And you don't get anywhere near there unless there is the representation in the clinical research and representation in the advice and the partnership that you need from the beginning to be able to get that clinical research done. So I am really proud to work in a therapeutic area where advocacy and science have gone hand in hand for years, and that the patient voice, that the community voice, that the advocacy voice is incredibly strong, I think, early in the drug development process, not in something all done and all wrapped up, but that something is that in the process of what you're building. So here at Gilead, in our HIV program, we have standing engagement with community and with advocacy before we plan studies. and even before we plan, I guess, before we plan programs, when things are um, not even proto medicines, or we're barely molecules. We're having the engagement of how can we do this better? How can we develop the things that are going to work in people's lives? How do we develop the diversity of things that work in the diversity of people's lives? It was one of the conversations that we're having a lot now with the potential development of long-acting medicines for HIV. It is going to be different strokes for different folks, and we have to make sure that we're making medicines that fit across the spectrum of what people need. And then, really importantly, making sure that our clinical research is representative of the populations who really are having the need. And so at Gilead, in our HIV programs, we have for years worked to make sure that we have clinical development programs that are reflective of the totality of the populations of persons who would benefit most from prevention or are in need of innovative treatment options. And we are now in our phase, for example, in our phase 3 programs, publicly declaring what we think is necessary to be able to have a diverse population, and saying that we're going to hold ourselves accountable in the inclusion in the representation of women and of Black populations in the United States and of the global populations in our phase 3 programs, so that we are not falling, so that we don't leave people behind as we're developing new medications. And we drive that going forward. I think that we have to all as an industry, but in great partnership, make sure that we are working hand in hand and constantly striving to be better, because it's an evolution and a process, but it's one that I think we are all in for.
Absolutely. And I think so often in our industry, we focus on new, exciting technologies as a way to improve diversity and inclusion representation. And they play a role, but often there's a very fundamental basic component that makes a bigger difference. So I'm on an IRB for Yale. I review protocols, and I can't tell you how many times I'm surprised that transportation isn't provided to and from the study site, or prepaid transportation, because now instead of waiting to reimburse something that might be prohibitive from someone participating, you can have it prepaid. You can have the lift come to their house for clinical trials. You can, provide the child care prepaid. You can provide meal services and other support to make it easier. And these are just fundamentally basic considerations that say, how do we reduce the burden of participating in clinical research so that a broader population, moms with kids who have to take time off work, can participate just as much as a single person without children who lives right next to the hospital. What are you seeing as really meaningful steps, both in the high tech, but also in the low tech areas that give you a little bit of excitement for the future?
I love that example that you gave. I mean, around here, we use the phrase a lot about it's how, where, and with whom we're working that make huge differences in the ability to engage diverse populations in the clinical research. And you give some great examples of how it's also where the clinical trial sites are.
Oh, yeah.
Situating and working with clinical trial sites that really are embedded within communities that are most affected, especially, for example, for things like HIV, which have geographic differences and track along some of our social fault lines, to be able to have clinical trial sites that are really close in and connected to communities most affected. And then also, like, who's working, and the faces of the investigators and the faces of clinical trial staff to be able to reflect the populations that are being worked. And so to be able to work with and grow clinical trial investigators that are reflective of populations. And one of the great things we get to do here at Gilead is collaborate across the world for growing a new generation of clinical trial investigators who are reflective of the populations most affected by serious diseases like HIV. And so it is the how, it is the where, it is with whom that makes a difference. And that requires forethought, that requires planning, that requires engagement. Sometimes that requires going a little bit slower to go faster later. And we put that all together to make sure that, because in the end, it's not only a positive readout, it's not a positive paper manuscript that makes the difference in the world. It's actually medicines that make the difference, that will make the difference in people's work. Really thinking about what the impact is from the start.
I love it. So we'll take some questions from the audience in a few minutes, but I want to ask a forward-thinking question. I'm very excited to see what your answer will be, because you work in a space where we've had the most progress of possibly any therapeutic area during our lifetimes. So the question is, where do you see the next wave of innovation for infectious diseases, and what type of innovations will we here at the Galien Awards be talking about, 5 or 10 years from now? And of course, this goes both ways. We often like to say in 10 years we'll be so far ahead. In the pharma industry, we know in 10 years it's one new drug, and it's a much slower pace of change. So pulling back the enthusiasm to reflect the rather slow moving environment that we're in. But realistically, what do you see? Where do you see us headed? What's on the horizon?
Well, where I would like to be is there, right? Where I would like to be in HIV, and looking to a decade and beyond, is to be able to say we're firmly on that pathway to ending the epidemic, and ending the epidemic broadly, everyone, everywhere. And so that is taking all the success that we've had globally in HIV, with going from a uniformly fatal disease to one that for most individuals is treatable, is quite treatable, and also preventable, but where there is still challenge, and there is still struggle, and there's still new infections, there's still individuals who cannot who are not successfully treated. It's developing the right kind of therapeutics that fit into people's lives, that allow them to get to a treatment or prevention option that's really workable for them, and then doing that at scale, so that we really do get to this point. And so that's hand in hand developing new treatment options. And we talked about the possibility of longer acting options that can be, and our innovation is focused on longer acting options, because those are options that are distinct from what already exists, that when people tell us the challenges is the day-to-day, the regular day-to-day slog of taking something, but also the tremendous stigma for living with HIV, of just the memory of HIV and all that it brings, even with the 2 seconds it takes to swallow a pill every day, how that is a weight on people's shoulders all the time. Or the inability to be discreet with one's HIV treatment or prevention, when one has to carry home a rattly bottle of pills, and that is full, and one has to take every day. So to be able to think of longer options that are potentially a pill once a week, or a shot every multiple months, that fit into people's lives, that would remove both the day-to-day burden and the stigma and discrimination of that burden, but also to be able to get people to be able to persistently take treatment or prevention for the long term. That's where I want to see the innovation go. And that goes hand in hand, that innovation goes hand in hand with education, stigma reduction, battling the homophobia, racism, transphobia, and other things that allow HIV to proliferate all around the world. And doing those together, hand in hand, really gets us to where we want to be in ending the epidemic. And I think for my colleagues in infectious diseases more broadly, it really is that continuous innovation. I love the idea of continuous innovation for infectious diseases. That's thinking about ending global epidemics, which we have hints from the past of the ability to end global epidemics of infectious diseases through vaccines. We've had such tremendous success in these last few years with therapeutics and vaccines against a global pandemic. We've had some tremendous success in the last generation with treatment of HIV and with other viral diseases, and at the same time, there's so much more to go. And I think it's an area to work in where one can be continuously challenged and surprised, but also continuously optimistic that we can battle the microbes in a way that's really different than our colleagues who work in other therapeutic areas.
We have a question coming in from the audience that sounds like it's coming from the startup perspective, and it's about how large pharma, how big or established companies can help startups that are breakthroughs and earlier stage and risky. How can they best support each other in the ecosystem? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first of all, good ideas and good science always lead the way, right? And
Yep.
And good ideas and good science that are pinned on seeking that really important impact which that's, I think I wear my heart very high on my sleeve here. I work at a place that is arguably doing the have done the adolescent transition from startup to biotech to pharma, and being always driven by great science, great ideas, and great ideas with great mission resonates with everyone. And I think that when I look into the sort of partnerships that we have with partners, both bigger and smaller, those are always the keynotes for me. Is the science great, and is the underlying driving force right?
Right. And I'll also add in on that question. For startups working with pharma, pharma's not averse to risk. And if anything, they're one of your better early partners and investors. So if you're looking at a VC, they're careful with the risk that they take because they have to return capital to their investors. And they have a much shorter time frame. Pharma's one of the few investors, pharma and governments and a couple other groups. It's one of the handful that take the really long approach and can say 15, 20 years from now, where do we want to be? And then can sit down and map out a 10 or 15 year development timeline. And of course, we want to get that as short and fast as possible. But pharma is able to allocate investment and talent and attract world leaders to take that long, deliberate, planned out approach together with regulators. So the earlier you can start having those discussions with the leading pharma players in your field, the more often you'll find there's a great opportunity for collaboration, for insight, for advisors, for investors. And even though there may not be an early a commercial partnership, because admittedly, if you're the pharma company that's invested $1 billion in a decade into something, you're not going to take risks with it unnecessarily. Your priority is helping patients with something works. So they're not going to play around with a new treatment that's coming out. But the large incumbents will find other ways to work with you on validating the science and advancing the innovation and seeing how they can work with you more closely. So I can highly encourage early pharma collaborations. Is a great place if you're in a startup to seek support, seek help, seek advisors, and of course, seek the expertise and the passion that Jared brings. If we could clone you, Jared, take you from Gilead and clone you for all the health companies out there with your enthusiasm and passion and willingness to wear your heart on your sleeve, combined with your scientific and medical experience, we would be seeing many more innovations come to market faster. So thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to give you the chance for some closing remarks. What would you like to share with the Galien Week attendees before we close today?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say is, I wanted to joke that my husband probably would not be happy if I were cloned. He thinks that there's more than that one is more than enough of me. So maybe we.
I think my husband would say the same thing. Yeah.
But we're not at that point yet in innovation,
yeah.
Anyway. So no, I think
we're far from that innovation. Yeah.
Fortunately, I think for all of my colleagues in this Galien Week, I think what really hits me when I see everyone across therapeutic areas and across disease areas is the commitment, and I think that's what we bring. We commitment to working really hard on really tough things, often for years or decades at a time, to get to great science, and then the commitment beyond that to actually achieve the health impact that we want to see. I think all of us have gone into this field. We get motivated by science. We get caught up often in our day to day. But what drives us in the end is the idea of really improving patients' lives and people's lives all around the world, and that's that's at the level of one person, and hopefully that's at the level of really at the population and thousands of people someday. I think that's what we want to. That's what we really want to do. And I'm fortunate to work in an area where over my lifetime I've been able to see how innovation has been able to do so much, and at the same time where I can see so much more potential. And it's motivating to me every day to come in and to work with the great colleagues I get to work with. And it's really motivating to see what other people work on and see their commitment. So I'm excited for seeing what other people bring during this rest of this innovation week. And Jessica, it's been really motivating to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's that dual combo, right? It's science and scale. And in pharma, you have both. There are other places you can do science, but there's no other place where you can do science and scale to the world, to go to every country with something in a reliable, predictable, high quality way. And that makes our industry so special. All right. Well, with that, I get to thank you, Jared. Thank you so much for being with us today. This webinar will be available on the Galien Foundation homepage. And of course, we look forward to seeing all of you on Thursday at the Galien Forum at the Alexander Center for Life Sciences in New York City, and at the Galien events, which the awards gala, which will see us in our Oscar finest at the American Museum of Natural History. Thank you all for joining us today.